Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome Frank Brown back to the studio. Frank, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this CIPE paper on emerging markets and small to medium-sized enterprises. We were talking before about tipping points and the sort of increasing awareness and maybe respect for international anti-bribery conventions in these emerging or frontier markets. So from your experience, do you think that the intermediaries and third parties are starting to take it seriously? Like they know that they're there, they know that the multinationals are taking it seriously, but how does that look when you go far away from home into some of these countries? And I realize we're speaking in generalities here, but do you see any sort of similarities in how the enforcement of these laws, investigations are now starting to take hold in terms of the level that they are being sort of embraced in these countries?
Yes. So I think the driver of this, we've reached a tipping point in part for political reasons. So if you look at a country like Kazakhstan, which is located between Russia and China in Central Asia, about 16 million population, incredible natural resources, very, very high levels of corruption. The leader of Kazakhstan has taken an interest in putting in place anti-corruption standard in keeping with the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is
Okay.
a very high, well-recognized standard. And that's in part because he's very, very keen with the slump in oil prices to attract foreign investment. And he wants to sort of counter the narrative that this is a hostile,
Okay.
corrupt place to do business. So what we see happening there is the government is drafting anti-corruption legislation that would include a compliance element that, in principle, could have real knock-on effects. And because Kazakhstan is a country where it's very much hierarchically top-down driven, those sorts of subtle signals, which might be considered subtle in a fully developed market,
Sure.
they are read very, very quickly and reacted to very, very quickly. So the level of awareness right away in state-owned oil companies, for example, becomes much higher, and you've got a whole host of different bureaucracies which are working in this realm and are much more reactive to the need to comply. So, but there's still a long distance to go between
Right.
that and real concrete change. But that change in awareness is hard to underestimate the importance of it. And the sense that if you want to be part of the sort of global economic community, you want to be taken seriously as a destination for foreign investment, you need to address these issues.
So for a multinational now that's looking in some of these regions, I mean, it's a little bit scary because, from my perspective, you see these third parties, these intermediaries, being willing to sign these robust anti-bribery affidavits and representations just because, as you've said, they need those partnerships to make money. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they embrace those laws. So how does a multinational sort of slice that?
So embracing the laws in terms of buying into the value system that the laws are a reflection of
Exactly.
is probably too much to ask in many,
Okay.
many cases. Embracing the laws in terms of changing behavior is perfectly reasonable and not difficult, I think, when you have tone from the top. So if the head of a mid-sized company doing business with a multinational understands the importance of putting in place programs and of firing employees who violate clearly stated policies, you can see behavioral changes very quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I would imagine an organization like that would be very transparent, allowing audit rights, for example, certain amount of monitoring if necessary. So they're more likely to be an open book to their partner.
Exactly, and that's often a requirement. if you want to be a vendor, if
Right.
you want to be a partner, you need to be ready to put those in place.
Well, let's talk about organizational structure because there's a lot of debate here in the U.S. about the reporting relationships among legal and compliance. But for a small company, okay, that may not even have the resources to hire a standalone compliance officer, to have a compliance team, any recommendations or best practices for how they can still have the independence of the function, even if they don't have the resources to hire an individual to lead that function?
That's a very good question. And it's one we often get when we first present our approach is companies saying to us, how can we possibly afford this? This is a luxury that we can't
Right.
afford. And there are a couple solutions that we've come up with.
Oh, interesting.
One is working with local business associations and chambers of commerce to create compliance practices within those chambers and associations. So you might have a compliance expert who can serve the needs of chamber association members. So a mid-sized business might hire this person to work a couple days a month
Okay.
to basically outsource
Interesting.
to outsource those duties. Another option is to create a compliance committee within the mid-sized enterprise and have them reporting directly to the board. So not one individual, but a group. And in some cultures we found that's a much sort of culturally acting collectively or as a group is a much more sort of comfortable means of dealing with inherently difficult and
Sure.
unpleasant.
And if it's a small enough entity that they don't even have a board, what would you recommend that it report into the CEO?
To the CEO, but that's, again, that all comes down to the CEO's commitment to this.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've talked in some of your other work about collective action in terms of helping to, for lack of a better word, raise the water level in some of these countries. Any examples of where you've seen that really had a positive knock-on effect?
So I think Thailand is probably our best example. And just to give you some sense of what we mean by collective action, when you have a critical mass of companies getting together and raising corruption issues as a fundamental threat to a country's economy and proposing a reform agenda, proposing policy changes, that can result in real change and real progress because governments in that case tend to take the companies much more seriously than if they had some sort of backdoor or backroom
sure.
discussions. And the companies feel more comfortable acting collectively. So they're less likely to sort of be singled off
Right.
and lose government contracts, be punished if they're acting collectively.
So there's an example where it worked.
It worked. So there's advocacy involved, there's transparency involved, there's a critical mass of companies that can work safely together in an effective way to frame the issue in a non-political way.
Was that around a particular industry or sector?
No, that in Thailand it's a wide range of different companies. Construction is the one sort of industry absent for reasons that I think are familiar to anybody who works in this field.
Sure.
But otherwise it's a very, very representative group.
And was it multinational backed or totally sort of indigenous?
A mixture. Yeah, a mixture. So you had some Thai companies that are very keen to do business or more business outside Thailand that saw the value in this.
Interesting. So you had larger firms participating in it as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, as the paper concludes, it's never too late to start on the path towards greater business compliance and integrity. So for those who might want to contact you and find out more about the work of CIPE and to perhaps read this paper, what's the best way to reach you?
So I can give you my personal email
Sure.
address, which is very simple. It's F as in Frank, Brown, like the color, at CIPE.org.
Great. And I'm assuming there's a contact form on the website as well.
There is. And the website, again, very simple, www.cipe.org.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.